The sirens had not yet arrived when John Walker ran into the flames. Smoke rolled through the night like a living thing. The old two-story house at the corner of Maple and 3rd was already half eaten by fire. Neighbors screamed. Someone shouted that children were trapped inside. No one dared to go near. John did not think. His body moved on instinct, the same instinct that had once pulled him out of ambushes and explosions. He ripped off his jacket, wrapped it around his arm, and kicked the door open. Inside, heat hit him like a wall. Every breath clawed his lungs. The sound of burning would mixed with the faint, terrified cries from upstairs. He followed them without hesitation. A woman lay unconscious in the hallway, a little boy clinging to her arm. John lifted her onto his shoulder, grabbed the boy's hand, and moved toward the stairs. The ceiling groaned above. Something cracked. He dove forward just as a beam came crashing down behind them. He could not see. The world was a blur of red and smoke. But his steps were sure, measured, the steps of a man who had walked through worse. Outside, the crowd gasped when he appeared through the doorway. Flames danced behind him as he staggered out, carrying the woman and the child. Paramedics rushed in. Cameras clicked. Someone yelled, "Who is that guy?" John did not answer. He walked to the curb, dropped to his knees, and coughed until his vision cleared. The paramedic tried to help, but he waved them away. "Check them first," he said. When the woman woke, she started crying, whispering thank you over and over. The boy clung to her, eyes wide with confusion and fear. John nodded once, then turned to leave. That was when Officer Daniels noticed the mark on his arm, a faded tattoo, barely visible under burned skin. An eagle, clutching a dagger, and a lightning bolt. It was a symbol Daniels had seen only once, years ago, in a classified briefing he was never supposed to mention. Daniels froze. "Sir, wait," he called out. John stopped but did not turn around. His breathing was rough, shoulders tense. "I just need your name for the report," the officer said carefully. John hesitated. The crowd watched. For a second, the crackle of the dying fire was the only sound. Then he said, "Walker. John Walker." The officer nodded, but his eyes narrowed. He wrote the name, but the unease stayed. News vans arrived within minutes. Reporters pushed microphones toward John, asking how he had pulled them out, how he had known what to do. He gave short answers, or none at all. When one reporter asked about his past, he walked away. That night, his face was everywhere. "Retired Marine saves family from blaze." The headlines made him sound like a legend. But behind the calm eyes in those photos, there was something darker, something that looked like guilt. John sat alone in his small cabin outside town, watching the replay on TV. The glow of the screen flickered across his scarred hands. He turned off the set, walked to the sink, and washed away the soot. The tattoo caught his eye again. He stared at it for a long time, tracing the faded lines. He had thought it was gone, erased when he left that life behind. But the fire had burned away the years of hiding, just like it burned that house. A knock came at the door. 3 slow knocks. John stiffened. No one ever visited this late. He opened the drawer beside him and felt the cold metal of his old service pistol, unloaded, but comforting. He opened the door a few inches. A man stood there in a dark coat, rain dripping from his hat. His face was partly hidden, but his voice carried an old weight. "You picked a bad night to be a hero," the man said quietly. John's jaw tightened. "You should not be here." The man smiled faintly. "Neither should you." Then he handed John a folded paper, yellowed, stamped with an old Marine emblem, and walked away without another word. John unfolded it. Inside was a single line written in neat black ink. "They found you." He looked out into the night. The man was gone. Only the sound of the rain remained. John closed the door, locked it, and sat down slowly. The paper trembled in his hand. He knew what it meant. His past, the one buried under layers of secrecy and guilt, had just been dug up by the wrong people. And this time, there would be no medals, no rescue, no applause. Only payback. The night air trembled with sirens that had not yet reached the street. John Walker stood at his cabin window, watching orange light bloom across the horizon like a wound opening in the dark. He heard screams. The smell of smoke cut through the pine trees. He was out the door before thought could catch him. Years of silence vanished as muscle memory took control. His boots struck the pavement. The glow grew brighter. A house was burning at the edge of town. Windows pulsed with firelight. Neighbors cried for help, but no one moved closer. John ran straight through the gate, his breath steady, mind locked on a single purpose. The front door resisted for a second, then splintered under his shoulder. Heat punched him in the face. Inside was chaos, walls alive with flame, a child's cry somewhere above. He found the stairs half collapsed, grabbed the railing, and climbed anyway. A woman lay motionless in the hall, a boy tugging at her arm, sobbing. John lifted her over his shoulder, pulled the boy close, and pushed through the heat. A beam cracked behind him. He dove forward as the ceiling crashed where they had been. Outside, the crowd gasped. He stumbled onto the lawn, smoke curling around him, the woman in his arms, the boy clinging to his side. Paramedics rushed in. Cameras flashed. "Sir, who are you?" a reporter shouted. John coughed once. "Just someone passing by." He turned away. Officer Daniels caught a glimpse of something on John's forearm, the faint outline of an eagle clutching a dagger and lightning bolt. The symbol struck him like a memory he was not supposed to have. "Wait, sir. Your name for the report." John hesitated. The crowd held its breath. "Walker. John Walker." Daniels wrote it down, but his hand shook. That insignia belonged to a unit erased from every record 15 years ago. Later that night, alone in his cabin, John washed the soot from his hands. The tattoo stared back through the burned skin, a ghost he thought he had buried. A knock came, 3 slow knocks. He opened the door slightly. A man stood in the rain, face hidden under a hood. "You picked the wrong night to be a hero," the man said. John's heartbeat slowed, heavy and measured. "They told me this day would never come. It just did." The man handed him a folded paper and vanished into the dark. John unfolded it. "They found you." By morning, every screen carried his face. "Retired Marine saves family from blaze." Reporters replayed the clip on loop. John stepping from the flames, the child clinging to him. The town called him a savior. But John hated noise. He shut off his phone, unplugged the television, and drove into the hills for silence. He had not been a Marine for years, and he wanted no spotlight dragging his past into daylight. Down in town, defense attorney Sarah Mitchell watched the footage while waiting for a court hearing. Something about him unsettled her, the precision in his movements, the way he avoided attention. Real heroes talked. This one ran. Later that afternoon, she saw him in person outside the grocery store. The townspeople crowded around, offering food, money, even a new truck. He declined everything politely, eyes distant. Sarah stepped closer. "Mr. Walker, the world could use men like you." He met her gaze for the first time. "The world already had enough of me." Then he walked away. That sentence lodged in her mind like a splinter. She asked a local reporter for his background check. Nothing came up. No service record. No ID beyond a post office box. It was as if John Walker had appeared out of smoke the same night he saved a family. At dusk, a black SUV parked across from John's cabin. A man inside watched through binoculars, radio murmuring softly. He whispered, "Target confirmed. Operative alive." Meanwhile, Sarah drove home replaying the footage frame by frame. Freeze, John's left arm. A mark half hidden by ash. Military, maybe. She screenshot it. Something told her this man's story was far from over. Back at the cabin, John sat with the folded paper still on the table. He kept rereading those words. "They found you." He poured himself a glass of water, hands trembling slightly. Outside, headlights flashed once from the tree line, then disappeared. He whispered to the empty room. So it begins again. Rain hung in the trees like a curtain when the stranger returned. John saw him before the knock. A dark figure crossing the clearing with the patience of a man who expected to be watched. The cabin's porch light cut a thin halo across his shoulders. 3 slow knocks again. Same rhythm. Same message. John opened the door only as far as the chain allowed. The man's eyes were calm, the kind that measured exits without moving. "You should not have come back," John said. "You should not have walked through that fire," the man replied. They stood in that narrow slice of space where past and present touched. John unlatched the chain and stepped aside. The stranger entered without looking around, as if the room was already mapped. "Name," John said. "Mason Cole." He pulled a folded envelope from inside his coat and set it on the table. "You know what this is." John stared at the paper but did not touch it. "Say it." "The sealed case file," Mason said. 15 years under lock. Signal traffic only, no paper trail, buried under 3 layers of false designations. The night you carried that boy out of the fire, every face scanner and keyword scraper woke up. Your tattoo was on half the screens in 2 hours. Someone matched it to the old emblem. The ones who keep that emblem alive started asking questions. John sat. His shoulders seemed heavier than his frame could bear. Who holds the file now? The ones who always did. But they are not the only ones interested anymore. Mason slid the envelope closer. I pulled a copy that should not exist. It exists anyway. John opened it. Inside lay a thin stack of photocopies, each page stamped with a faded classification mark and an old Marine crest. The title read, Kandahar, Sector 9, Patrol Delta, After Action Package. A line above the crest showed a code name only a handful of men had ever spoken out loud. Gray Falcon. The words throbbed like a bruise on paper. Your name was stripped, Mason said, replaced by a call sign that never maps to a person. But the debrief notes still carry your cadence. Whoever is reading it will hear you. That is enough. John moved through the pages with careful hands. Photos of a dirt street at dawn. An alley ripped open by a blast. A doorway with a palm print in dust. Bodies covered by tarps that were too short for the men beneath. A list of civilians with ages written in the margins. A child's name circled twice. Mason watched him. You were never meant to carry this alone. I was meant to carry it forever, John said. They let the rain fill the space between sentences. Say it, John added. Say how the operation reads when you strip away the lies. Mason took a breath. Gray Falcon deployed under the flag of recovery. A local contact promised a route to an arms warehouse. Your unit went in. The contact turned. He sold your timing to a rival faction. They staged a blast to frame your team. Civilians died. The blast was not yours. The chaos was theirs. John's jaw tightened. His eyes stayed on the page that showed the alley, the place where sound had flattened into a single, endless note. Keep going. Command needed a clean story, Mason said. They could not afford the truth. A warlord named Victor Hale, who now calls himself a builder and wears charity like a suit, brokered the betrayal for cash and leverage. He rose through a web of contracts while your unit names sank into mud. A few men in suits hid the trail. You signed a silence that was not a choice. John did not flinch at the name. It rose in him like smoke anyway. Hale. He owns corners of this country now, Mason said. Ports, clinics, security firms with bland names. He hosts ribbon cuttings and shakes hands with mayors. No one asks how he bought his first fortune. John closed the file. His fingers pressed the cover until the page edges bowed. The boy, he said. Mason nodded. Alive. A priest kept him safe for a year. Then he vanished into a system that shapes orphans like clay. I tracked a thread that disappears inside one of Hale's foundations. There is an adoption record that should not be accessible. The dates fit like teeth. If my read is right, the boy grew up under Hale's roof with a new name and a private school badge. He is not a child anymore. John held the edge of the table as if the room had moved. He never knew. He cannot, Mason said. Not from me. Maybe not from you. A truck passed on the distant road. Headlights crawled across the far trees and gone. John's eyes flicked to the window only once. The old habit never left him. Who matched me? John asked. A local officer who saw enough of the world to recognize a thing he should not, Mason said. He wrote your name with a steady face and shaking hands. Someone above him flagged the footage, forwarded it with a whisper. By the time the fire cooled, a private desk in the city had your photo and a request for a backroom brief. That desk belongs to a firm that serves people like Hale. John stood and paced once, tight and silent. The floorboards did not creak. If they come, they will not come with badges. No, Mason said. They will come with contracts. They will turn the town that cheers your name into a theater you cannot leave without looking guilty. They will push a case that was buried, paint it as a duty undone, and feed the public a story with clear villains and clean lines. Truth is messy. They know how to sell the opposite. John lifted the file again, then set it down. You warned me 15 years ago this would never sleep. I warned you it would sleep until noise woke it, Mason said. You made noise when you ran into that fire. You had no choice. I know that. But the cameras do not care why you moved. Who else knows? John asked. A lawyer who cannot ignore puzzles, Mason said. Sarah Mitchell. Smart. Stubborn. She saw your arm and started digging without knowing where the tunnel leads. If she keeps going, she will find air that burns. John pictured her in the crowd by the grocery store, the clear gaze, the steady voice. He had seen that kind of resolve in men who stepped forward when stepping back would save them. It never ends gently. Keep her out, he said. She is already in, Mason replied. Someone tampered with her car this morning. She survived because she checks what others assume. That tells me two things. She will not stop, and the ones who want her quiet are impatient. John's face darkened. They touched a civilian. They will touch anyone who threatens the narrative, Mason said. Silence stretched. Rain ticked on the roof. The wood stove clicked as metal cooled. What do you want from me? John asked. To stop walking alone, Mason said. You took the heat for men who did not deserve your cover. You shielded a child who never knew your name. You do not have to keep paying without allies. There are still a few of us who remember which way the blast came from. John's gaze dropped to the tattoo on his arm, the eagle that time had tried to erase. Allies mean witnesses. Witnesses mean weight. Weight shared is weight lifted, Mason said. John almost smiled at that, an expression made of fatigue more than humor. You always spoke like someone who trusted scales. I trust evidence, Mason said. He tapped the envelope. This is the piece they hoped time would rot. It did not. It only yellowed. John looked toward the door, the tree line, the wet dark that hid slow-moving men. What will they try first? They will frame you as a ghost with blood on his hands, Mason said. Then they will present a neat package to a judge who owes favors to donors with polished names. If that fails, they will escalate. Accidents, smears, setups. Then we force daylight, John said. We dig faster than they bury. Mason nodded once. And you accept help. John exhaled. The breath left him as if he had been holding it for years. I accept help. Mason reached into his coat and placed a small hard drive on the table. This holds the comms from that night. Not perfect. Enough to break a lie if handled by the right hands. There is a risk. The chain to get it was not clean. Nothing about that night is clean, John said. Mason moved to the door. You will have 2 days before they try something public. Use them. Find a lawyer. Choose your ground. John picked up the hard drive. It felt heavier than it looked. If I step into a courtroom, they will paint me as a weapon out of time. Then they will learn why you still scare men who pretend you never existed, Mason said. He opened the door. Rain spilled across the threshold. He paused, half in and half out. One more thing. The boy. If my line is right, he is close to this town now. School trip, donor event, something with Hale's foundation. I could be wrong. I rarely am. Mason left. The door closed. The cabin settled. John stood alone with the file, the drive, and the rain. He pressed his palm to the old emblem on his arm and held it there until the ache steadied his thoughts. He spoke to the empty room in a low voice. Almost a prayer, almost a vow. No more running. Outside, beyond the trees, a camera lens blinked. The rain on the cabin roof became the sound of rotor wash in John's memory. It was night again, but a different sky, a different wind. Kandahar before dawn. A moon like a cut fingernail. Dust rising from a walled district where alleys ran like veins under dim lamps. John's unit moved in a staggered line, each man a dark shape with eyes that never stopped reading corners. They spoke with gloved hands more than voices. Comms stayed tight. No chatter. The mission card in John's chest pocket was thin and blunt. Recover a shipment of weapons before they reached men who would turn them on schools and markets. A local contact had sold a route. The route was precise. Too precise. John had marked that with a pen stroke, a small doubt that would not leave. The contact waited by a blue door with a single crack that ran from top hinge to handle. His name was Hamid Rahimi, a shopkeeper by day, street dealer by night, a man who could switch faces like masks. He smiled with all his teeth when John approached, then crossed himself with a hand gesture used by neither faith nor tribe. It was a code the unit had been taught to recognize. Safe passage. Green light. John did not trust smiles with codes behind them. He nodded once and moved on. Sector 9 was a grid of compounds braided together by alleys where shadows stuck to the walls. The air had a smell of old heat and oil. Dogs barked in sequence as the unit slid past. Somewhere a generator knocked in a tired rhythm. John kept the pace steady, not too fast, not too slow. He read door frames, watched for wires, watched for things too clean, too undisturbed. The route led toward a narrow lane with a blind corner and a choked drain. That was where his doubt grew teeth. He signaled a halt and sent 2 men wide to the right, into a parallel run of stalls and stacked crates. They ghosted forward. The contact frowned, then caught himself and smiled again. John saw both faces, filed both away. Door is 3 houses down, Hamid whispered. Left side metal latch. You wait here, John said. Hamid's eyes flicked down the lane and back. I guide. I must show. You already did. John motioned him to the wall. Hands where I can see them. Hamid spread his fingers. They trembled. Not fear. Anticipation. John moved. The unit followed him, split like a zipper, 4 and 4, 2 shadows crossing a thin river of darkness. The metal latch glinted under a strip of moon. He crouched and listened. Inside he heard men breathing. He counted 4. He heard the scrape of a heavy box. He raised his fist, then 2 fingers, then 1. The door opened soft under a pry tool, and the room swallowed him. Wooden crates. Grease paper. The smell of cosmoline. Numbers stenciled in paint. They found the first shipment within seconds, lids levered, contents checked, serials snapped and photos for chain of proof. Clean. Too clean. No dust in the grooves. No thumbprints. John's neck went cold. Out, he said. This is staged. On the alley, a child's voice floated from behind a wall. A soft cough. Then a whisper of rubber on stone. A phone camera lens flashed the faintest circle of light and vanished. John's head turned just enough to see the shadow of a small face in a chink of broken bricks. He had seen that shape in cities on every continent, a child awake when adults closed their eyes. The world tipped. The air changed. The dogs went silent. John did not hear the blast start. He felt the boom become a pressure wave that bit his teeth. A door across the alley jumped off its hinges. Flame rushed through the lane with the speed of poured fuel. Men shouted. The child screamed. A second shock tore through the walls, brighter and harder, and dust swallowed everything. He was on the ground with grit in his mouth before the sound came back. The unit called out positions by number. One voice did not answer. John tasted blood and stood into the smoke. The blast had not come from the crates. It had come from the drain that had been choked with debris. A channel had been cut under it, wire up the wall, remote somewhere unseen. The route had been a funnel. The clean crates had been bait. He pulled 2 of his men to their feet and dragged them behind a stone trough. More shouts. A spray of rounds stitched the alley mouth. The contact was gone. Only a smear of wet on the wall remained where his shoulder had been. John felt no surprise. A woman cried from the doorway that had blown open. John saw a hand and a wrist with bracelets. He heard the scraping turns of a man trying to stand with a leg that would not hold. Civilians were in the line of every bullet, in the drift of every new spark. Smoke out, John said. Push left, clear the courtyard, keep the fire from the door. He moved faster than thought, counting steps, counting breaths. He took the corner low, swept it with light and muzzle, saw a man with a rifle behind a stack of fruit crates, and put him down with 2 rounds that entered clean and left clean. The courtyard had a well in the center. The blast had cracked the stone lip and sent water out in a black tongue across the floor. John used it to wet cloth, pressed it against a child's face, bridged the doorway with his body while the mother pulled the boy out. The boy's eyes were wide and hollow. He stared at John through the cloth like a diver through a mask. John knew that gaze. It was the gaze of someone who would remember a specific face for a lifetime. More men fired from the rooftops. One of John's team took glass in the cheek and kept still until the next volley stopped. They returned fire with short control, each round named by intent. A burst hit the generator. The street light coughed and died. The night dropped a curtain. John welcomed the dark. He knew how to move in it. Offset 2 houses, he said into his mic. Do not chase the flash. Stay on the arc. He brought the mother and child into the courtyard shadow and pointed to a low arch that led to a storage room. Stay there. Cover your mouths. The mother nodded, tears black with soot. Then John caught the smallest detail, a thread that would pull the whole weave apart. On the wall behind the well, someone had pressed a palm into fine dust. The print was large, the thumb crooked from an old break. It was fresh. It pointed toward the drain where the first wire had run. He knew that hand. He had shaken it 3 days earlier when Victor Hale arrived in a white shirt and flawless grin, a consultant to contractors with a clipboard and a practiced laugh. Hale had come as a middleman for supplies and small repairs, lifting a town that creaked with age. He had walked the market, fed coins to children, charmed a district elder. He had watched John's unit with interest that looked like admiration. John had seen light under that smile, a hard light. He had dismissed it as common vanity. He saw now that the light had been calculation sharpened to a point. Hale's palm print on a wall inside an alley only fighters and thieves used. Hale's name encoded chatter that Mason had once flagged but could not prove. Hale's money moving in circles that turned into lines that turned into weapons. John took the mic. New variable, he said. External actor, disguised as aide. Mark for later. Extract without parade. They fought their way to the end of the alley, step by step, leapfrogging between door frames. The smoke turned heavy and sour, the kind that eats the back of the throat. The street opened on a small square where carts slept under tarps. Two men ran across with sacks on their shoulders, trying to use the chaos as cover. John fired low, dropped them to their knees, and stopped when the sacks split and spilled nothing but cloth. Not weapons. The real shipment had moved earlier, on a different clock, under a story he had been fed like a child. The blast had been the photograph for the headlines. The dead would be called collateral, the living would be filed as numbers, and the night would be logged as an attempt that arrived too late. He felt rage rise and choke. Then he pushed it back down where it could not make him slow. They reached a steel door that opened into a passage the locals used as a shortcut during daylight. John pushed his team through, then went last, covering the rear. A round caught the edge of the door and sparked. He counted 3 beats, then slid through, closed it, and drove the bolt with his shoulder. On the far side, under a hanging lamp, an old man sat on a stool with an expression that did not change when 8 armed strangers appeared from darkness. He lifted his chin toward a shelf. John saw a first aid kit and a chipped bowl of water. The old man had watched men move through this space for decades. He knew when to speak and when to be stone. John placed money on the shelf without a word and pressed a clean bandage to his teammate's cheek. The child from the courtyard stood in the doorway of the storage room, eyes tracking John. The mother held him back, but the boy took 1 step forward. John knelt to be level with him, reached into his vest, and pulled a simple copper coin he carried for luck. He placed it in the boy's palm and closed the child's fingers around it. A promise without language. A vow he could not name. Gunfire thinned, then faded. Sirens in the distance, the late kind that arrive after the story is already written. John led his unit out through the passage, into a lane lined with shuttered stalls, and vanished into the clatter of the city waking up. The report he filed later would include distances, angles, ammunition counts, timestamps, a map drawn by hand, and a list of those lost. It would not include the palm print that belonged to a man with clean shoes and a borrowed conscience. It would not include the way the boy's eyes had burned through the smoke to fix on him, as if seeing a lighthouse. Those things would live only in his memory, and in the pages Mason would later pry loose from hands that wanted them to turn to dust. Command asked for clarity. Command did not want truth. The blast did not fit the narrative that would secure funding and quiet donors. A rival faction could be blamed easily. A warlord with a hidden friend in a suit could not be named without tearing open rooms where deals were made. They pressed John to name a cause that would survive a press briefing. He understood the game. He had played it before he knew the rules. He wrote the one sentence that would protect the child from being pulled into a spectacle. He accepted weight that did not belong to one man alone. He signed a non-disclosure thicker than a prayer book. He took the mark off his arm once he left the service, but the skin remembered. Hamid Rahimi disappeared. Later, whispers said he had been found in a ditch 3 townships away with a smile carved where his throat should have been. A message. Loose ends are for men without patrons. Victor Hale had patrons. He learned to be his own. Years passed. Contractors became boards. Boards became foundations. A name on a wall replaced a ledger entry in a basement. Hale cut ribbons with mayors and spoke about rebuilding. He stood with children at schools funded by companies that had profited from broken streets. Cameras loved him. His palm prints were wiped before they dried. John built silence around himself like a fence. He worked small jobs with cash, answered few questions, slept with one eye open for years after the noise faded. He told no one that on some nights he still woke with sand in his teeth and a boy's gaze in his mind. He told no one that his hands always paused at sinks, at windows, at the edge of a table where a single sheet of paper could change a life. He carried the memory of the alley like a splinter he would not pull. He knew one day it would work its way out through skin and bruise. He knew the bruise would draw attention. He did not expect that attention to arrive in the form of a house fire and a camera lens that mapped his arm for the world. When the stranger named Mason placed the sealed file on his table, it did not give John news. It gave him evidence. The palm print on the wall, the drain wired like a trap, the clean crates set like stage props. The child saved and then erased into a new life built by the man who had sold his father's street to a buyer with a bomb. Back in the cabin, John placed the hard drive beside the photographs. The rain eased. The roof stopped speaking. He looked into the dark glass of the window and saw two versions of himself layered like a double exposure. The man who had walked into an alley and chosen to be a shield, and the man who had walked into a fire and been seen. He spoke one name in the quiet. Not a curse, not a threat, a name that tasted like metal. Hail. In the distance, thunder rolled that might have been weather and might have been memory. He did not close his eyes. He did not need sleep. He needed ground to stand on, a line that would not bend, and a courtroom where truth would be forced to hold its face up to light, no matter how much it hated the glare. The first leak appeared as a single encrypted email in Sarah Mitchell's inbox. No sender name, no signature, only a line of text. For the one who asks too many questions, file attached. At first, she thought it was spam. But the file's metadata carried something strange, a marine timestamp from 15 years ago, labeled Sector 9, Kandahar. The same name she had heard from the officer who mentioned John Walker's tattoo. Sarah's pulse quickened. She downloaded the attachment into an isolated drive, disconnected her Wi-Fi, and opened it. A grainy video filled the screen. Soldiers in shadow moved through a narrow alley under night vision. Muffled voices. Then an explosion, loud, raw, and too close. The camera fell. For a moment, it caught a man dragging a child out of the flames. Even through distortion, she saw the face. It was John Walker. She froze. Her office lights flickered. The sound of her own heartbeat filled the room. The date on the footage matched a classified report she had once glimpsed during a defense case years ago, a sealed file labeled Gray Falcon Incident. She remembered the judge cutting her access before she could read a single line. Now, part of that file was sitting on her laptop. Sarah leaned back, staring at the video as it looped again. "What did you do, John Walker?" she whispered. She called an old contact from her time as a legal intern at the Pentagon, a data analyst named Lewis. He owed her favors, but his tone tightened when she mentioned the file. "Sarah, that operation never existed," he said. "If you're seeing anything with that label, close it and forget it." "Forget it," she repeated. "A man risked his life to save people last week, and now I find a video that shows him saving a child 15 years ago in the middle of a classified mission. You expect me to walk away?" "Listen carefully," Lewis said. "That footage is radioactive. It connects to a cover-up that still pays salaries. If someone leaked it to you, it means they want you in the blast radius, not out of it." But Sarah had already made up her mind. That night, she copied the file onto a secure flash drive and left her apartment through the back staircase. Her instincts told her to move like a hunted thing, quietly, without patterns. She drove to a storage unit she used for sensitive cases, an unmarked place between warehouses where no one asked questions. Inside, she pinned every scrap of information she had about John Walker onto a corkboard. Newspaper clippings, fire rescue reports, witness statements. At the center, she placed a photo of John leaving the grocery store, eyes shadowed, expression unreadable. Around it, she drew threads, arrows connecting past to present. The whistleblower's video became the core of it all. She slowed it frame by frame. The camera's timestamp jumped by seconds in the middle, proof of an edit. She enhanced the audio, isolating one faint English word amid the chaos. "Hail." She replayed it again and again until it burned into her mind. By dawn, she had traced Victor Hale's public records. Charities, construction contracts, political donations. The same name appeared in multiple shell companies tied to overseas security consulting. All clean on paper. All too perfect. She closed her laptop, rubbed her eyes, and whispered, "You built your empire on a graveyard, didn't you?" The next morning, her car would not start. The key turned. The engine coughed once, then nothing. She popped the hood. Something looked off. Wires cut. One line melted clean through. It was surgical, not random. Someone had been inside her vehicle. She stood still, letting the realization settle. Then she laughed, low and sharp. So you know I am looking. Good. Instead of fear, anger took over. She called a mechanic she trusted, had the car towed without reporting it, and spent the rest of the day working from her office as if nothing had happened. But she changed her route home, avoided the same corners, checked reflections in glass doors. Paranoia became routine. That night, as she crossed the street to her apartment, she noticed a black sedan parked too close to her building. Two silhouettes inside. Engine running, lights off. She slowed her step, pretending to fumble for her keys. The sedan's headlights flashed once, a signal. Then it pulled away, smooth and unhurried. She went upstairs, locked every door, and pulled her curtains tight. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A voice spoke before she could answer. Male. Calm. Precise. You have something that belongs to men who do not forgive curiosity. Sarah steadied her breath. Then they can come earn it. A pause. Then, you are brave, Ms. Mitchell. But bravery and survival rarely shake hands. The line went dead. She exhaled slowly, then pressed record on her voice memo app. If anything happens to me, look at the Gray Falcon files. Look at Victor Hale. And find John Walker. He is not what they say. She saved it under a hidden folder labeled Case Notes. By morning, she visited a retired judge she trusted, her old mentor, Judge Carter. He had seen more buried files than any living man. When she told him what she had, his eyes flicked to the door twice, then back to her. Sarah, you do not want this, he said quietly. There are cases you win by silence. I cannot stay silent if people died for the truth, she replied. Carter leaned forward. Then at least understand what you are touching. That operation killed civilians. But the one who caused it never faced a court. The one who took the blame disappeared. If you drag this into light, you will not just be arguing law. You will be arguing against history itself. Then history will have to defend itself, she said, standing. She left him there, old eyes watching her like she was walking into a storm. That afternoon, a plain envelope slid under her office door. Inside was a single photo, her car from last night, parked near her building. On the back, handwritten in neat black ink, last warning. Her hands shook, but her mind sharpened. Fear became fuel. She burned the photo over a candle, watched the edges curl and blacken, then crushed the ash into a cup of cold coffee. At midnight, she packed her files and drove to a motel outside the city. There, she used a public terminal to send an encrypted copy of the leaked footage to 3 journalists she trusted, all known for publishing what others would not touch. She used a new alias, leaving no trail back to herself. Then she sent one final message to the whistleblower's anonymous address. I am in. Whatever this is, I am finishing it. An hour later, a reply came. Then you will need protection. He already knows you. Attached was a photograph. John Walker, outside his cabin, speaking with a man in a dark coat, Mason Cole. Sarah stared at it, her chest tight with disbelief. So this is bigger than a cover-up, she muttered. This is a network. She printed the photo and pinned it to the board above her motel desk. Beneath it, she wrote 3 names, Walker, Hale, Cole. She drew arrows between them until the lines tangled like a web. In that moment, she made a decision that would rewrite her life. She would not hide. She would confront the man who had started it all, the Marine who saved a family but carried ghosts in his eyes. The next morning, she left the motel before sunrise and drove toward the woods, where the retired hero lived in silence. Behind her, a black sedan merged onto the same road, headlights dim, keeping distance. Sarah did not look back. She had seen fear up close before, but this time, fear was on the other side. The knock came before sunrise. Not the cautious rhythm of a friend, but the blunt insistence of authority. John had been expecting it. He opened the door without hesitation. 2 federal agents stood outside, rain dripping from their jackets, badges glinting under the porch light. The one in front read from a small tablet. John Walker, you are under arrest for the unlawful engagement of civilians during Operation Gray Falcon, Kandahar Province, 2009. You have the right to remain silent. John did not resist. He simply held out his hands. The cuffs clicked, cold, deliberate metal. The sound echoed through the quiet cabin like a verdict already written. As they escorted him down the dirt path, Mason Cole watched from the tree-line, jaw tight. He whispered into his earpiece, "They moved faster than we thought." "Then we moved faster still," came Sarah Mitchell's voice. 2 hours later, Sarah was already in the federal courthouse, her heart racing beneath a mask of composure. The news had broken before the sun fully rose. War hero or war criminal? Retired Marine arrested in connection to Kandahar massacre. The headline painted John in blood. By noon, the entire country had an opinion about a man who had never spoken more than a dozen words to the press. Sarah met him in the holding room before arraignment. He looked calm, almost too calm, sitting at the metal table with his hands folded. The cuffs were gone, but the marks remained, faint rings around his wrists. "I told you this would happen," he said quietly. "You did," she replied. "But you did not tell me why you let them find you." John's gaze met hers. "Because hiding makes me look guilty. And because if Hale wants a courtroom, I'll give him one. Just not the ending he expects." Sarah studied him. "You understand the stakes. They are charging you with crimes that can still carry life without parole. And the jury will not forgive civilians in body bags." He nodded once. "Then we make them see what really happened." She opened her folder and spread the documents across the table: transcripts, leaked footage, satellite images. "We have the video, the inconsistencies, the witness reports that were scrubbed. But what we do not have is direct proof that Hale orchestrated the blast." John leaned forward. "Then we find it inside their own narrative. They will show you everything they buried if you let them talk long enough." The door opened. A guard stepped in. "Time's up." As they led John out, he turned slightly toward Sarah. "They will try to make this about me. Do not let them." The courtroom overflowed the next morning. Reporters crammed behind barricades. Veterans in uniform filled the benches, some glaring, others silent. On the far side, Victor Hale sat in a dark suit, pretending disinterest, a faint smile playing at the corner of his lips. His lawyers watched from the second row, silent, alert, expensive. Sarah could feel his gaze long before she saw him. The prosecution's table was stacked with sealed files and digital exhibits. Their lead attorney, Leonard Briggs, had the air of a man certain of victory. He approached the bench with the confidence of someone who already knew the verdict. "Your Honor," Briggs began, "we are here to correct history, to deliver justice for the civilians lost in an operation hidden behind military codes and silence." Judge Carter presided, his expression carved in stone. Sarah felt a flicker of unease. She trusted him once, but the way his eyes avoided hers now said otherwise. Briggs continued, "The accused, John Walker, led a mission that resulted in the deaths of 12 civilians, including children. For years, this nation hailed him as a hero. But evidence will show that his actions were reckless, his motives unclear, and his accountability long overdue." He paused, letting the silence sharpen. Cameras clicked. Sarah rose slowly. "Your Honor, the defense requests the court to remember that evidence and accusation are not the same thing. My client has faced death more times than most can count, and every time, it was in service of this country. The only reason we are here today is because he survived long enough to expose the truth." Judge Carter's gavel tapped lightly. "Proceed." The first witness was a soldier, Sergeant Dale Rivers, a member of John's old unit. His testimony was practiced, cautious. He described confusion, miscommunication, chaos. Every word framed John as detached, unpredictable, dangerous. Sarah approached him for cross-examination. "Sergeant, you said Captain Walker ignored orders to wait for backup. Do you recall what the communication delay was that night?" "About 3 minutes," Rivers said. "And how long did it take for the blast to happen after the signal was lost?" He hesitated. "Less than 2. Sarah stepped closer. "So the explosion occurred before backup could even arrive, meaning Captain Walker couldn't have caused it because he was already inside the alley, trying to save a child, wasn't he?" Rivers shifted in his seat. "That might be accurate, ma'am. Might be or is." He swallowed. "Is," the courtroom murmured. Briggs objected, but the damage was done. During recess, Sarah walked past Hale's row. His smile remained fixed, like something sculpted. As she passed, he whispered, "Truth doesn't matter, Miss Mitchell. Perception does." She stopped. "Then I'll destroy your perception." He chuckled. "Try. The system you trust was built by men like me. Day 3 brought the twist that nearly broke her. A motion appeared overnight, a new piece of evidence from a classified division claiming that John's fingerprints had been found on a detonator fragment. The chain of custody was missing 2 signatures, but the court accepted it anyway. Sarah demanded forensic verification. They denied her request. That night, she drove home under rain so heavy it blurred the windshield. As she slowed near her apartment, headlights appeared behind her, high beams flooding the rearview mirror. The car followed through every turn. She accelerated. The other car matched her speed. When she reached the bridge, the driver pulled beside her. A dark window rolled down. A hand held something, not a gun, but a phone. On the screen, a live video feed of her office burning. Sarah slammed the brakes, heart pounding. The other car vanished into the storm. When she reached her office, the fire was real. Her files, everything except digital backups, gone. She stood in the rain, staring at the flames. Fear turned into a hard, cold resolve. They think they can scare me, she whispered. Let's see how they handle exposure. The next morning, she entered court with a flash drive hidden in her jacket, a recovered copy of Mason's data logs from the Gray Falcon operation. It included one fragment of radio chatter that changed everything. Target asset Hale confirmed. Civilians present. Proceed per payment. The voice was not John's. It was Victor Hale's. But before she could present it, Briggs called his final witness, Victor Hale himself. The courtroom went still. The man rose, polished and calm, his every movement rehearsed for cameras. Mr. Hale, Briggs began. You were present in Kandahar at the time of the explosion, correct? Yes, as a civilian contractor. And what was your role? Logistics. I provided supply coordination for reconstruction zones. Did you authorize the operation? I had no authority to do so. Did you ever meet the defendant? A pause. Yes, once. He was professional, but intense. I remember thinking he carried too much weight for one man. Briggs nodded as if Hale's words were gospel. No further questions. Sarah rose slowly. Mr. Hale, you claim you had no operational authority, yet your name appears on procurement ledgers for restricted equipment, including encrypted radios used exclusively by Tactical Command. Hale smiled faintly. Those are standard for contractors in volatile regions. She stepped closer, then explained this transmission. She plugged the flash drive into the court's monitor. Hale's voice filled the room, the same one captured in Mason's recording. Target asset Hale confirmed. Civilians present. Proceed per payment. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Briggs shouted an objection. Judge Carter's gavel slammed down, demanding order. Hale's composure cracked for the first time. His jaw tightened. That recording is fabricated. Sarah looked straight at him. You would know, since you were the one giving the orders. The judge ordered recess for review. But as the jury filed out, Sarah noticed something odd. One juror, seat number 7, avoided her gaze. He whispered to the bailiff before leaving. Mason caught her in the hallway minutes later. Juror 7, he said quickly. Name's Andrew Hale. Nephew. Victor's bloodline. Her breath caught. Conflict of interest. The court vetted them. Apparently not well enough, Mason replied. That explains the motions, the early rulings, the missing evidence. He's been feeding information to Hale's lawyers every night. Sarah stormed back into the judge's chambers. Your Honor, one of the jurors is related to the prosecution's key witness. This trial is compromised. Judge Carter removed his glasses slowly. Do you have proof of intentional misconduct? I have bloodlines. That is enough. The judge sighed, looking older than ever. You are making powerful enemies, Sarah. Are you sure you know what you are doing? She met his eyes. The question is, do you? For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then he said, Motion granted. Juror 7 will be dismissed. Outside, news spread like fire. The trial that was supposed to bury John Walker now looked rotten from the inside. When court resumed, Sarah addressed the jury directly. Her voice did not tremble. You have heard about explosions, civilians, and war. But this case is not about a man's mistake. It is about a man's silence. A silence that protected a child, while others built empires from the smoke. My client's only crime was loyalty to a country that chose the wrong heroes. She turned to John. You once told me they would make this about you. You were right. But today, we make it about the truth. The jury sat frozen. Briggs tried to recover with closing remarks, but the energy had shifted. The spectators who once doubted John now watched Hale instead. By evening, the judge called adjournment for deliberation. Cameras followed every step as the jury disappeared behind closed doors. Sarah stood outside the courthouse steps, exhausted but defiant. Mason joined her, cigarette unlit between his fingers. "You think they will acquit him?" he asked. "I think they will hesitate," she said. And hesitation is the first crack in a lie. Inside, Hale sat alone in the witness lounge, his reflection warped in the glass wall. For the first time in years, he looked uncertain. John remained in the holding cell, silent, his mind far away, back to the boy he once saved, the one raised under Hale's name. He whispered into the emptiness, "Justice is not a verdict. It is a mirror." Somewhere above, thunder rolled again. And for the first time, it sounded like applause waiting to fall. The verdict never came that day. The court recessed again under the pretense of further deliberation. But Sarah could feel the shift. Something invisible had moved, the kind of quiet rearrangement that happens only when power repositions itself. That night, she sat alone in her office with the lights off, reviewing every file she had left. The leaked evidence, the transmission proving Hale's voice, the dismissed jurors list. It should have been enough to expose the rot. Yet she knew something was wrong, deeply wrong. The judge had recessed the case too easily. He had not looked surprised when she mentioned the juror's blood tie to Hale. He had looked resigned. Sarah opened her laptop, tracing old records of Judge Carter's cases. For 30 years, he had presided over the most sensitive trials: military misconduct, private contractor disputes, classified briefings. Every verdict tilted in one direction, toward silence. She kept scrolling until she found it. A case from 2010, sealed under executive privilege. Plaintiff, United States Military Command. Defendant, unidentified operative, deceased. The judge on record, Carter, Raymond H., presiding authority. Date, 6 months after the Gray Falcon incident. Her hand froze on the mouse. "No," she whispered. "You did not." The next morning, she walked into his chambers unannounced. Carter looked up from a stack of papers, his face composed, but his eyes betrayed the tension. "Sarah," he said, tone measured. "You are out of line." She closed the door behind her. "I trusted you. You still can." "No, I cannot." She threw a printed copy of the 2010 record onto his desk. "You presided over the Gray Falcon cover-up. You signed the classified order that buried the case. The same order that erased John Walker's name and turned Victor Hale into a clean slate." Carter leaned back in his chair. For the first time, his mask slipped. Age and guilt settled on his face like dust. "You do not understand what was happening back then," he said quietly. "The country was bleeding from all sides. Funding was drying up. We were losing contracts, losing control. That operation could have started an international scandal. My orders came from above. You followed them," she said bitterly. He looked up sharply. "You think justice is black and white? That the law exists outside politics? I tried to protect what was left of the system. You protected killers," she snapped. "You let a man who sold his unit to the enemy walk free. You let a child grow up under a lie. And you let the only good man in that operation carry the guilt alone." Carter's voice hardened. "Do not preach to me, Sarah. I made choices that kept this nation from collapsing under its own hypocrisy. Walker was collateral in a machine too big for conscience." She shook her head slowly. "Then you are no judge. You are the gavel that silences the truth." He stood, anger cracking through restraint. "Be careful. You are walking in territory where names vanish. I kept you alive through this trial. I can just as easily stop doing that." Sarah stepped closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. "Then you will have to bury me with him." She turned and walked out. His voice followed her to the door, softer this time, almost pleading. "You are chasing ghosts, Sarah. Leave the past buried. It was meant to die." But she did not stop. Meanwhile, in the detention cell below the courthouse, John waited for word from Sarah. The day felt longer than any he had endured in the field. He watched the clock tick, steady and cruel. Each second sounded like a memory dragging its feet. When the door finally opened, Mason entered, face pale. "You need to hear this before she tells you herself." John stood. "Tell me what?" Mason dropped a folder on the table. Inside were photographs, grainy, pulled from a surveillance feed. The first showed Victor Hale at a charity gala, hand on the shoulder of a young man in a suit. The resemblance struck John like a blow. The boy's eyes, wide, familiar, filled with the same silent intensity he had seen once through smoke and dust. John's voice came low, rough. "That is him." "Yes," Mason said quietly. "The child you saved in Kandahar. His name now is Ethan Hale. Adopted at age 9 under a sealed foreign transfer order. Victor raised him as his own." John sank into the chair, every breath heavier than the last. He never knew. He grew up thinking the man who caused the blast was his savior. Mason nodded. "And now he is his heir, managing Hale's foundation, handling investments, appearing beside him at every press event. Clean record. Public favorite. The perfect legacy." John pressed his hands to his face. "I kept that boy alive so he would never carry the stain. And he has been living in the heart of the rot." Mason's tone softened. "You did not fail him. Hale did." "No," John said. "I failed by letting Hale live." Upstairs, Sarah prepared her next move. She had requested an unscheduled hearing to submit new evidence, but her real plan was different. She needed time to expose Carter before the system devoured them all. When she met John later that evening, she did not hide her expression. "I know who buried you," she said. His eyes narrowed. "Who?" "Judge Carter. He was part of it. He signed the original suppression order after Kandahar." For a moment, John said nothing. The silence stretched until it hurt. Then he smiled, not out of surprise, but recognition. "I knew someone high up had to keep the files buried." He had that look, the kind of man who carries his guilt like a medal. Sarah nodded. "He claims he did it for the system." "Everyone does," John said quietly, "until the system decides it no longer needs them." 2 days later, the court reconvened. The prosecution came armed with new statements, supposedly from independent witnesses. Every one of them repeated the same fabricated line, that John had given the detonation order. Sarah rose to cross-examine, but Judge Carter interrupted before she could speak. "Counselor, unless you have new evidence that invalidates these testimonies, I will allow the prosecution to proceed." His tone was cold, procedural, but Sarah saw the flicker of unease in his hands. His gavel tapped twice, an unconscious tremor of guilt. She turned her attention to the jury. "You have been told this man is dangerous. You have been told he is capable of atrocities. But ask yourselves, if that were true, why did he risk his life to save a woman and her child from a burning home last week? Why step into fire when silence could have kept him safe?" Briggs objected. "Emotional manipulation." Carter hesitated, then allowed it. Sarah pressed forward. "Because that is who he is. A man who cannot stand by while others burn. 15 years ago, he saved a child. Today, that child lives under a stolen name, raised by the man who betrayed him." The courtroom erupted. Hale shot up from his seat, shouting over his lawyer. Carter slammed the gavel for silence, but the noise had already swallowed control. Sarah turned, locking eyes with Hale. "Tell them, Victor. Tell them where you found Ethan. Tell them what you promised the world to hide." Hale's mask cracked. "You have no proof." "Then let us call him," she said. "Let us call Ethan Hale to the stand." Briggs froze. The crowd murmured. Carter's face drained of color. He whispered something to his clerk, too low for anyone else to hear, but Sarah caught the first word. "Delay." And in that instant, she understood. He was still protecting Hale. That night, Sarah met Mason in a dim parking lot near the courthouse. The rain returned, thin and relentless. She sat behind the wheel, hands trembling on the steering column. "They will kill this case," she said. "Carter is compromised. He will stall until public interest fades." Mason nodded. "Then we bypass the court. We take it to the press. I have files, coordinates, transaction histories. Enough to shred Hale's empire." Sarah exhaled, staring out the windshield. "John deserves the truth first." Mason handed her a sealed envelope. "Then give him this." Inside were 2 photos, one of Ethan Hale at a podium, the other of the adoption papers signed by Victor Hale and countersigned by a federal liaison. The second signature was clear and unmistakable. Judge Raymond H. Carter. Sarah stared at it for a long time. He was in on everything, even the adoption. Mason's voice was grim. He made sure the boy was raised as Hale's shield, a living monument to the lie. When Sarah brought the papers to John, he looked at them in silence. His eyes moved slowly over every signature, every date. When he finally spoke, his voice carried both rage and sorrow. "I carried him out of a burning alley, so he could grow up believing the man who caused it saved him. They turned innocence into propaganda. Sarah placed a hand on the table. We can still fix this. We expose Carter and Hale together. John looked up at her, his expression unreadable. You believe justice is still possible? She hesitated. I have to. He nodded once. Then I will give you the truth, all of it. She frowned. What do you mean? John leaned closer. There was another recording. One I never showed Mason. It proves Hale set the explosion himself. Sarah's breath caught. You kept it. He nodded. I was waiting for the right time. The courtroom will not save us, Sarah. But the truth might burn them down. Outside, thunder rolled again. In the distance, a figure stood under an umbrella, watching the courthouse lights fade into the night. Victor Hale spoke softly into his phone. Carter's slipping. Walker knows about the boy. A voice on the other end replied, steady and cold. Then end it before he speaks. The call ended. The rain kept falling. And somewhere inside the courthouse, Judge Carter stared at his own reflection, a man who had traded truth for control, and whispered, God forgive me. They are all coming for me now. The file arrived at dawn on a drive the size of a coin. Mason slid it across the table in the interview room, eyes hard, voice low. This is the one Walker kept, he said. Chain is ugly, but the audio is clean. Sarah plugged it into a secured player. John sat opposite, shoulders squared, gaze steady. He had asked for this moment. He had also feared it. The waveform pulsed. Static. Then voices layered in a tight band of radio hiss. A man spoke first in clipped English, confident, unhurried. Asset confirmed. Wire primed. Civilians present. Payment upon spectacle. Sarah knew that voice now. Victor Hale. Another voice followed, a liaison with a dry tone. Copy, Victor. Film the debris. Keep uniforms in frame. John did not flinch. He stared at the table as if memorizing the wood grain. The past rose anyway. Muffled footfalls. The scrape of a crate lid. A child coughing. Then the command that sliced through doubt. Trigger on my mark. Silence stretched like a held breath. Now. The blast hit the speakers with a violent thud that rattled the metal chair legs. Sarah felt it in her chest. Mason steadied the player with one hand. Over the roar came a shout. Unmistakable. Kid in the alley. Push left. John's own field voice. Urgent. Focused. The tape rolled on. Gunfire. Splinters. A soldier calling. Rivers down. Another yelling. Door. Door. Then a staccato exchange closer than comfort. Blue clear. Negative. Wait. A single shot cracked. Silence swallowed the channel for 2 seconds that felt like a fall. Then a harsh inhale. Friendly hit, someone said. Repeat. Friendly. John closed his eyes. The room tilted, not from the chair, but from a memory that had never lost its edge. He spoke without lifting his head. That was me. Sarah's hands tightened on the tabletop. John, play it, he said. On the tape, his own voice came next, stripped bare. Cease. Civilian behind target. He moved into my sight line. I fired blind to stop a muzzle rise. My round struck blue too. My fault. The words did not sound like an excuse. They sounded like weight laid down in a ledger. Background noise flooded the channel. Wails, boots on rubble, a woman praying under her breath, a generator choking out its last turn. Then, faint but clear, the child again, coughing through cloth. Hale's voice returned, lower, tight. Cut exterior feeds. Keep locals running. Frame this as tribal infighting. Move the crates. Mason stopped the tape. The room went very still. Sarah swallowed. This proves the detonation order. It also shows the friendly fire. John nodded. He had the stillness of a man who had rehearsed pain until it no longer surprised him. He was 22, John said. Name was Ortiz. He stepped where a gun rose over the mother's shoulder. I fired to break that line. I was late by half a beat. Mason spoke quietly. You reported it immediately on the channel. Command stripped that segment to save face. I asked them to record it, John said. They recorded everything except the part that made a headline hurt. He looked up at Sarah. If you play this, they will change their case. They will stop calling me a butcher and start calling me careless. They will make the boy and the blast secondary. Sarah weighed the choice. If we hide it, they will find it and bury you with it. If we reveal it, they will pivot and try to make the jury forget Hale's order. Then anchor them to both truths, Mason said. Hale created the theater. John made a split-second mistake trying to shield civilians from the theater. Sarah slid the drive into an evidence pouch. We take it in today. The courtroom buzzed before the session even began. News of the mystery file had leaked in cryptic posts and rumor threads. Cameras waited like hawks. John entered with the same steady gait, jaw locked, eyes ahead. Sarah placed the evidence on the table, requested immediate admission, and braced for the fight. Briggs rose, voice smooth. Your Honor, the defense seeks to introduce a doctored recording without proper chain. Sarah cut in. We request a bench review with spectral authentication. The metadata mirrors the original mission clock. The voices are distinct. The liaison's badge number is audible at minute 4. Judge Carter leaned back, weighing thunder against lightning. He looked older than the week before. He looked cornered. Bench review granted, he said at last. The court tech patched headphones to the bench. Carter listened, face flat. Twice he stopped, rewound, and listened again. When he handed the set back, his fingers trembled. Admitted, he said. Play it for the jury. The lights dimmed. The waveform filled the screen. The blast took the room like a storm. Gasps. Strained whispers. Hill's name cutting through like a blade. And then John's own admission, plain, direct, unforgiving. Briggs sprang up. The defendant admits a friendly fire incident. That is negligence under combat rules. Sarah stood immediately. The same tape proves the explosion was engineered by a civilian contractor for profit. That is murder. The jury leaned forward, caught between two magnets. In row 3, a veteran wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Hill kept his gaze on the floor. He did not lift his head when his own voice echoed back at him. He only signaled to his counsel with 2 tight taps of his fingers. Briggs pivoted like a man changing shoes mid-run. Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution withdraws the claim that the defendant intentionally targeted civilians. We now assert that the defendant's reckless conduct led to the death of a fellow soldier and contributed to civilian harm. Sarah faced the jury. He reported the friendly fire in real time. The part of the tape that cleared him was cut by the same machine that handed Hale the detonator. Briggs spread his hands. He still fired. Sarah nodded. Yes, he fired while shielding a woman and child from a blast ordered by a man sitting in this room. Judge Carter watched the exchange with an expression that flickered between duty and shame. The gavel never moved. He let the argument breathe, then called a short recess. In the hallway, reporters swarmed. Sarah kept walking. John kept silent. Hale disappeared into a side door with 2 guards and a lawyer who had stopped pretending this was easy. Mason caught Sarah by the stairwell. They will shift everything to Ortiz now. They will find his parents. They will frame John as the reason they lost a son. Then I will call Ortiz's squad partner, Sarah said. He wrote a private statement that night. I found it in the leak. He said John pulled Ortiz out under fire and refused evac until civilians were clear. Will Carter let it in? Mason asked. He has to, she said. The tape opened the door. Court resumed. Sarah called Corporal Knight, Ortiz's closest friend. The man's hands shook when he settled in the witness chair, but his voice held. Ortiz was my brother, he said. We lost him in that alley. Captain Walker carried him to cover. He was the one who stopped the shooting so we could get the mother and kid out. He took blame on the channel before command told him what to say. He never hid it from us. Briggs approached, gentler than before. Corporal, a bullet still left the defendant's weapon. Knight nodded. Yes, in the worst 2 seconds of my life. The man who made that alley explode planned those seconds. He is the reason a kid coughed through smoke that night. He is the reason my friend is a folded flag. He looked straight at Hale. And he did it for money. The gallery rippled with a murmur that felt like a tide turning. Briggs retreated. Carter did not gavel. He let the words stand. Sarah followed with the liaison's partial ID from the tape. The court tech enhanced the digits. A name matched a former contractor now working for a Hale subsidiary. Each brick stacked on the last until the wall began to lean. Through it all, John sat as if anchored. When Ortiz's photo appeared on the screen, a kid with a wide grin and a crooked cap, his composure fractured. He looked once, long and unguarded, then bowed his head. Sarah rested a hand on his forearm, brief, steady. He did not move, but the tension in his shoulders eased a fraction. Briggs gave his closing for the day with the quiet tone of a man who had lost his favorite weapon. You must judge actions, not myths, he said. Accidents have consequences. Sarah stood last. So do orders. A contractor staged a blast to sell a story. A soldier made a split-second shot trying to stop a muzzle aimed over a mother's shoulder. One man printed checks. One man pulled civilians from fire. You know the difference. Carter recessed for the evening. The jury filed out with faces that no longer looked certain of anything except the gravity in front of them. Hale left by a rear corridor, jaw set, phone pressed to his ear. The mask had slipped and would not stay put. In the now quiet courtroom, John remained seated for a moment longer. He looked at Ortiz's photograph again. The air felt heavy, and not only because of memory. He deserved better than a tape, John said softly. Sarah nodded. He deserved the truth. John stood. The cuffs waited at the door, but they did not carry the same sting. A different weight had shifted. Not gone, but measured. Outside, evening clouds stacked over the city. Thunder rolled low. Cameras flickered. The narrative had not ended. It had changed course. And for the first time since the arrest, the path ahead did not aim solely at a cell. It aimed at a man in a suit who had ordered a spectacle and called it progress. It aimed at a judge who had signed a burial and called it duty. It aimed at a boy who had grown into a man with a stolen name. The tape had broken the dam. The flood was on its way. The day after the tape aired in court, the country split in two. One half saw John Walker as a broken soldier who had carried guilt too long for a system that used him and threw him away. The other half saw him as proof that heroes could bleed and still be dangerous. Every network looped the same 10 seconds, his voice admitting to the accidental shot. They played it over the explosion, edited with ominous music, cutting just before Hale's order. Context vanished. Sympathy turned to confusion. Victor Hale knew exactly how to control the noise. His foundation released a statement within hours. Our hearts go out to all victims of war, including those misled by the chaos of battle. He appeared on morning television, grief in his eyes, humility in his voice. Captain Walker was a brave man once, he said softly. But sometimes bravery twists when truth is buried too long. It was the perfect weapon, calm, composed pity. He looked like a man saddened by tragedy, not the architect of it. Sarah watched the broadcast from her office, fists clenched. Look at him, Mason said, standing behind her. The man sells redemption like a perfume. He is not selling redemption, Sarah muttered. He is selling absolution, his own. She shut off the TV and opened her laptop. The feed from social media poured in. Comment sections turned war zones. Veterans shouted for justice. Families of the fallen demanded answers. Influencers recycled sound bites for views. John's face was everywhere again, not as the man who saved a family from fire, but as a symbol of military arrogance. The tide was shifting. If Sarah did not act fast, everything would drown. That night, she met the one family who refused to be silent, the woman and child John had saved from the burning house. Their names were Claire and Noah Emerson. They lived in a small townhouse at the edge of town, its front porch covered in flowers people had left after the rescue. Claire opened the door, eyes tired but kind. You must be his lawyer. Sarah nodded. He would not want me to ask, but I need your help. Noah ran up behind his mother, clutching a toy fire truck. Is Mr. Walker in trouble? Sarah crouched down. Some people think he did something bad a long time ago, but others, like me, believe he did the right thing, and that he saved you because he could not stand to lose another child. Claire's lips trembled. We owe him our lives. The least we can do is speak. The next day, the Emersons appeared on live television. No PR team, no handlers, just truth. Claire spoke plainly. The man who carried me out of that fire didn't hesitate, didn't ask who I was. He just acted. That is not a monster. That is a protector. She lifted Noah's hand toward the camera. This is who he saved. You want to know who John Walker is? Ask my son. Noah leaned forward shyly and whispered into the microphone. He's my hero. It aired nationwide. Within hours, clips flooded the internet. Hashtags flipped. Hashtag Justice for Walker trended for the first time. A firefighter union issued a statement of support. Then a veterans group joined in. The narrative Hale had built began to crack. But cracks draw attention and retaliation. That night, a journalist who had defended Sarah's case online found her apartment broken into. His laptop gone. Files wiped. 2 whistleblower accounts vanished from the servers hosting Mason's data. And Sarah's car, the new one she had replaced after the last sabotage, was impounded by police for investigation. Hale's machine was moving again. When Sarah confronted Judge Carter the next morning, his eyes were bloodshot. I told you they would destroy you, he said. They have the reach to turn every truth into noise. Then I will scream louder, she replied. Do not be naive, Carter said. Hale has friends in every office from here to D.C. He will bury you with paperwork before the truth can breathe. Sarah leaned over his desk, her voice razor thin. You are going to help me unbury him. Because if you do not, I will expose your signature on that adoption order. The public will see your name beside Hale's. Carter froze. His mask fell completely this time. You would destroy me. I would free the man you destroyed first. He exhaled, long and slow. If I move against Hale, I will not survive it. Then make sure the fall means something, she said. That afternoon, Carter filed a sealed addendum to the case record, a document that quietly unsealed the classified Gray Falcon investigation. The evidence became public within hours. It was legal suicide, but it was enough. News outlets shifted. The same anchors who once called John a criminal now called him a soldier trapped between orders and morality. Public opinion tilted again, not completely, but enough to draw blood from Hale's empire. For the first time, investors pulled from his foundation. A senator rescinded a contract. Anonymous accounts leaked expense reports linking Hale's company to illegal weapons transfers. Hale responded with fury disguised as calm. He held another press conference, this time less composed, his smile brittle. John Walker was a man broken by war, he said. His lawyer manipulates emotions to distract from tragedy. The footage you see is taken out of context. My only wish is that we all find peace. But his eyes betrayed panic, darting between reporters, scanning for control that no longer existed. Inside his cell, John watched the broadcast in silence. The guards had given him access to one news channel. He said nothing, only turned the volume down when Hale appeared. Mason visited after hours. He is cracking. The boy's next. John looked up. Ethan? Yes. Reporters found the adoption papers. He will be forced to answer questions soon. Hale will not let him speak freely. John's jaw set. If the world hears the boy, it ends. Hale cannot silence him forever. Mason hesitated. You sure the truth will not break him too? John's expression softened. He deserves the truth, even if it hurts. Meanwhile, Sarah's firm began to fracture under pressure. Partners distanced themselves. Clients withdrew. The managing partner called her in. You are turning this firm into a target, he said. Walk away from the Walker case before you lose your license. I would rather lose my license than my conscience, she replied. When she stepped outside, reporters waited. One asked, Ms. Mitchell, are you still confident your client is innocent? She met the camera head-on. He is not innocent. He is human. The real question is, are you ready to forgive a man who never stopped saving others, even when it cost him everything? The clip went viral within an hour. Public rallies followed. Veterans marched with signs bearing John's photo beside the Emersons. A hero doesn't burn alone. Truth has no expiration date. The same fire that once threatened to consume his name was now lighting streets. Even Judge Carter received anonymous messages of gratitude. One simply read, You finally remembered which side the law belongs to. But redemption never comes without a counterstrike. Late one evening, Sarah received a parcel with no return address. Inside, a single USB drive. She opened it carefully, expecting another leak. Instead, a video played, Hale sitting in a dark room, smiling. Congratulations, Ms. Mitchell, he said. You have turned a courtroom into theater. But do you know how theater ends? With an audience that forgets as soon as the lights go out. He leaned forward. Walker's truth will die when attention shifts. I, however, will live in the next scandal because I am the one who writes them. The screen went black. Then a final line appeared in white text. Control perception. You control reality. Sarah stared at it for a long time. Then she closed the laptop and whispered, Not anymore. The next morning, the Emerson family arrived at the courthouse before anyone else. They waited on the steps, holding a framed photo of John from the night of the fire, soot-covered, eyes determined, the boy in his arms. When reporters asked why they were there, Claire answered simply, Because when everyone else ran, he walked into the flames. We will not let them burn him twice. The image spread across the nation. It became the face of the movement. The mother, the boy, and the soldier who refused to run. Inside his cell, John saw the photo on the prison TV. For the first time in years, he smiled. Not because he was free, but because truth, however scarred, was finally breathing air again. The world might still be divided, Hale might still hold power, but the silence had been broken. For the first time, John felt the weight of his guilt lift just enough to let something else in. Hope, he whispered to himself. One act of mercy does not erase the past, but maybe it teaches the world to stop repeating it. Outside, rain began to fall again. But this time, it felt like cleansing, not punishment. And as the thunder rolled over the city, the story of John Walker, hero, soldier, sinner, savior, no longer belonged to the courts, the media, or the men who built lies. It belonged to the people who refused to forget. The courthouse was silent when the jury returned. Even the reporters stopped whispering. 12 men and women filed in, faces pale with exhaustion and the weight of what they had heard. Judge Carter looked older than ever, his gavel resting loosely in his hand. Sarah sat beside John, her pulse thundering in her ears. Mason stood near the back, eyes fixed on the jurors like a man counting seconds before an explosion. The foreperson rose, holding the verdict slip as though it might burn. On the charge of unlawful civilian engagement during Operation Gray Falcon, she began, voice trembling. We find the defendant. A pause stretched through the air. Everyone leaned forward. Not guilty. Gasps broke from the gallery. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Veterans in the back row exhaled in disbelief. John sat motionless. He did not smile, did not bow his head. His hands rested flat on the table, steady as stone. Sarah blinked away tears. You are free, she whispered. He nodded. By their words, maybe. By my own, not yet. Judge Carter cleared his throat, voice cracking. Captain Walker, this court recognizes your service, your sacrifice, and the injustice you endured. You are hereby released with full exoneration. It should have been triumph. It felt like silence. Then, chaos erupted. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Cameras flashed. Sarah shielded John as they exited through the side hallway. Outside, the crowd had gathered, veterans, civilians, strangers holding signs. Truth won. Walker walks free. And above them all, screens blazed with breaking news. Victor Hale under federal investigation. The confession tape had leaked to every major network. Not the edited version, but the full recording. Hale's voice. The order. The payment confirmation. The detonator. Everything. In one day, his empire collapsed. Contracts were frozen. Investors fled. Federal agents swarmed his offices. When the cameras found him leaving his mansion, his smile was gone. He tried to run, first to a private airstrip, then toward the coast. He never made it. The same media he had once controlled now broadcasted his fall in real time. The man who had built his fortune on a lie was buried under the weight of truth he could no longer shape. That evening, John walked out of the courthouse into fading daylight. The air smelled of rain and asphalt. Freedom felt strange, too light for the years it had cost him. Sarah joined him on the steps. It is over, she said softly. He shook his head. No, it never ends. You just learn how to live with the ghosts. She looked at him, the man who had saved lives, lost brothers, and carried both guilt and grace in equal measure. What will you do now? John gazed at the horizon, where storm clouds split around a thin ribbon of light. Start over, he said. Quietly. He took one final look back at the courthouse, the place where lies had burned and truth had finally walked out alive. And then he stepped into the crowd, not as a hero, not as a victim, but as a man finally unshackled from history. Together, the cemetery was quiet, a place where even the wind seemed to walk softly. Rows of stone markers stretched across the hill like the disciplined lines of men still standing guard. John Walker stood among them, dressed not in uniform, but in the plain clothes of an ordinary man. The morning sun filtered through the clouds, warming the cold marble that bore names he would never forget. Ortiz, Rivers, Knight, and the others who had followed him into the alley that night in Kandahar. He knelt before Ortiz's grave, brushing away a few leaves. The headstone was simple, engraved with the Marine emblem and a line that read, "He never turned away from the fight." John placed a single coin, the same one he had given the child years ago before the blast, now returned, scarred but whole. "You earned this more than I ever did," he said softly. Footsteps approached. He turned and saw Sarah walking down the path, her hair tied back, a bouquet of wildflowers in her hand. She stopped beside him, looking at the endless rows of names. "I thought you might be here," she said. "I come every year," John replied. "This time, it feels different." She knelt beside him, placing the flowers at the base of the grave. "You gave them justice. You gave yourself peace." He shook his head gently. "Peace is not a prize, Sarah. It is something you visit, and then you let it go." For a moment, they both stood in silence, listening to the rustle of grass and distant birds. Then, from behind them, a small voice called out, "Mr. Walker." It was Noah Emerson, the boy from the fire. He ran across the grass, a toy helicopter clutched in one hand, his mother following at a slower pace. John's face softened as Noah reached him, arms wide. The boy hugged his waist tightly. "Mom said we could come see you," he said, looking up with a grin. "I brought this for you. It flies." He handed John the toy, its blades painted silver. John crouched down, taking it carefully. "That's a fine machine, soldier." Noah smiled proudly. "You're not sad anymore, right?" John hesitated, then smiled back, a small, weary smile that reached his eyes. "Not today." Claire nodded from a distance, tears glinting in her eyes. Sarah watched them, her heart full. She knew this, not the verdict, not the headlines, was the moment that mattered. John turned toward the graves one last time, standing tall in the quiet morning. The ghosts felt lighter now, not gone, but no longer haunting. As he walked away with Sarah and the Emersons, the sun broke fully through the clouds, spilling light across the names carved in stone, the light of remembrance, not regret. His redemption had never been in the verdict. It had begun the moment he ran into fire again, to save, not to atone, and found his humanity waiting for him inside the flames. Months passed. The trial faded from headlines, replaced by new scandals, new noise. But somewhere beyond the reach of cameras, Sarah Mitchell sat in a small studio, her voice steady as it filled the quiet. "This is Echoes of Valor," she said, beginning her latest podcast episode. Today's story is about a man who never called himself a hero, a soldier who carried silence heavier than medals, and who taught us that truth is not found in courts or verdicts, but in the moments when no one is watching. Soft music swelled under her voice. She looked through the glass window at the audio engineer. "Cue the tape." A familiar voice came through, John Walker's, recorded during his final interview before he disappeared from the public eye. "Sometimes saving others means losing yourself first," he said quietly. "But if you're lucky, someone finds you again before you're completely gone." There was a pause on the tape, the faint sound of him exhaling. Then his last words, "That's enough for me." The clip ended. Sarah sat in silence for a few seconds, letting the words hang. She continued softly, "I do not know where John Walker is now. Some say he moved north. Others say he works construction under another name. I think he just wanted to live where no one asked who he used to be. Maybe that is what freedom really means." She closed her script, eyes glistening. For everyone listening, remember this. Heroes are not the ones who never fall. They are the ones who stand back up, even when no one will ever know. The outro music began to play, a low, haunting guitar. Far from the city, under an open sky, a pickup truck rolled down an empty highway. The landscape stretched wide, golden fields fading into distant hills. Behind the wheel, John drove in silence, his window open to the wind. On the passenger seat sat the small toy helicopter Noah had given him, its blades catching sunlight with every turn of the road. He glanced in the rearview mirror once, as if to check that the past was still behind him. Then he smiled, quiet, content, unburdened. Ahead, the horizon glowed with the pale gold of a new dawn. For the first time in years, John did not feel haunted. He felt human. And as the road carried him farther into the light, the ghosts of Kandahar finally stayed where they belonged, behind him, resting, remembered, and free.